Thank you, Willeen, and thank you, Indivisible. After the 2016 election, if you were anything like me, you were in a very dark place, wondering how we got here, how could such a person possibly be elected, and one of the groups that really came out to respond with a plan. Not just emotion, not just anger, but actually a plan. Indivisible, I think, was so central in helping organize the resistance. And in my opinion, I believe in a few years, in 2 years when the blue wave comes, and then in 2020 when we take back the White House, we can thank Indivisible, maybe perhaps more than any other single group, for actually having a plan in place to get power back. So I wanted to talk a little bit today because we've just seen another scandal this week, but there are so many scandals. It's like a fire hydrant, right? You don't know which one to look at any given time. There are so many constantly coming out. But you may have heard of the scandal of the fired chaplain, the congressional chaplain. It turns out we had a Catholic chaplain who was agreed upon between Nancy Pelosi and Paul Ryan, and this chaplain had the audacity to pray in Congress during the tax bill that Congress not make winners and losers, but to make sure and be mindful of the poor and those without resources. And for that offense, Paul Ryan demanded his resignation. The first time in history that any chaplain to Congress was forced to retire. And I started looking for some kind of justification for that. Have you guys ever looked at the different versions of the Bible? You know, you have the KJV, you can look them up. There's the Bible, KJV, the Bible, NIV, NRSV. Well, I came across a new version that I had never read before, but I hear from it a lot. It's the Bible GOP. So I started looking through how they interpreted these stories. And I looked at when Moses went to talk to Pharaoh. And it turns out, after he went to talk to Pharaoh about letting his people go, people started putting up yard signs saying, "Back the Pharaoh." Law and order, right? I looked at the miracle of the loaves and fishes, and that was really different. In the versions I had read before, Jesus sees a whole multitude of people waiting to hear him speak, and he feels compassion for them. And there's a miracle that takes place. And it's interesting because if you read that story, judging from what you've read before, he could have just said, poof, and you would have had bread and fish for everybody. But instead, he got people to get together, like you guys are getting together today, to organize and to take baskets themselves. And the miracle of that loaves and fishes was that it never ran out. It was enough for everybody. But then I read the Bible GOP. And so in that version of the story, Jesus said, all right, forget these losers. Take the bread and the fish to Herod. Surely if we give him all the bread and fish, he will distribute it fairly and equally as is justice. But it is strange how we hear so much about faith and Judeo-Christian values from the Republican Party, and I am confident that if Jesus walked into the GOP convention and preached the Sermon on the Mount, that he would be crucified all over again. Because to say that blessed are the peacemakers in this environment, when our national instinct seems to be to go to war, that war is the new normal, how radical is it to hear words like, blessed are the peacemakers? In our national environment, when we are told over and over how worthless the poor are and how it is their fault that they don't have enough to eat or adequate shelter, how radical is it to hear the words, blessed are the poor? So I want to talk a little bit today about American goodness and my vision for the future. Because I really believe that miracle of the loaves and fishes says a lot about us today. Because those fishes and those loaves never ran out, not because of some magician, but because people gathered together with common values and with goodwill. And we learn the lesson that miracle is possible anywhere where there are people of goodwill and of solid values, who care about one another and who are willing to work together. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about my wife, too, Jennifer McCall. So she's standing up right now taking pictures, and she's really good at doing that, by the way. If everybody would please give her a hand for all she does for... True story, when I decided to announce, I told her that she's the one who should run. And you'll find her story as remarkable as I've found it. She's my best friend. She's a great mom, a good person to be around, and she's brilliant. In fact, our youngest daughter, Abby, who always has something to say, one day we were riding in the car back from one of our mini campaign events, and Jennifer said, Abby, who do you think wears the pants in this family? And this is the first time Abby had ever heard that expression, wearing the pants. What does that mean? And so Abby said, well, Dad wears pants, and you usually wear dresses. And so we said, no, Abby, that means that who has the power in this relationship, in this family? Who wears the pants? And so Abby said, Dad does not wear pants. We finally taught her how to, what the meaning was. I'm not the pants in the family. That was her final conclusion. And that's fine because, on average, if I look back through my life, the women in my life have, on average, had better sense than most of the men that I've grown up around. And it's really encouraging to me to see the leadership in this group coming from women. And that was one of the reasons why I told Jennifer she should be the one to run for this. But she is running for it because she's my partner in everything, and she travels with me everywhere, so I really appreciate her. But the more you know about her, the more impressed you'll be. Before she was born, just a few years before she was born, her parents were in Vietnam. Her father had been training as a helicopter pilot during the Vietnam War to fight on our side, to fight against the North Vietnamese, against the communists. And that war ended before he could complete his training as a helicopter pilot. Back then, you never knew when you were going to be picked up by the re-education forces. They would come and take you if they thought you were in any way a threat. And so one day, Jennifer's mom, this was before she was born, Jennifer's mom waited for her husband to get home. He never came home, and he didn't get back. And finally, she went wandering around the town to find out where her husband was. And one of the men in a tavern there said they had seen the re-education forces, the communist forces and the police, come and pick him up and take him to a re-education camp. And because he had only been training as a pilot, he didn't stay in there as long as some others, but she has an uncle who stayed in there for much longer. And those were awful places. And as soon as her father and her mother could, they got out of Vietnam. And I'm really proud of what America did back then, because these poor refugees who left Vietnam with nothing came here to America, and in just one generation, her mother and father are two of the hardest working people I've ever met. Her mother was a seamstress, still is a seamstress, has been so all of her life. They are so frugal and so hardworking. They are the salt of the earth. And their daughter, one generation away from being penniless and on the run from communist police, their daughter owns her own business on Green Street, right there where all those plantation houses are. She owns her own firm. She went to law school, and she found a place in America, and her parents found a place in America where just within one generation, you could change the destiny of your family. And that's the America that I believe in. Because you hear all the time that these immigrants are going to take our jobs, that they're going to take this and take that. But I believe that the goodness of America is not diminished by being shared. But in fact, it is just like the miracle of the loaves and fishes. It is as abundant as our need, and it is as plentiful as our willingness to work together for the common good. And Jennifer's story is proof of that the miracles can still happen right here in America if we open our hearts to them. And that's the future that I foresee for our country, working together. Compassion, listening to communities who are in pain, who are suffering, and understanding them, and cooperation, working together for a better future for everybody, not just some. What are my priorities for compassion and cooperation? It starts with health care. I believe that nobody should die because they are poor, and nobody should be poor because they're dying. And that's why I believe that Medicare for All is the best solution for our healthcare system right now. We would save money, it would be fiscally conservative, and most of all, it would save lives, which is the best kind of conservative you can be. You cannot be patriotic unless you first love your neighbor. And if you wish health and prosperity and security for you and your family, you must wish that for your neighbor if you're really going to follow that rule of loving others as yourself. That also means that we need to make sure that everybody has a decent job. It's been too long since we've had a New Deal. The New Deal for the 20th century came about when we were a poor country. We need a New Deal for the 21st century that focuses on green, sustainable jobs, jobs that help build wind turbines and solar panels that bring sustainable local energy to these regions, that give these young people graduating from high school a choice in their destiny to either work in the technical field or in the university field. But either way, we need to have jobs in our local areas that are both robot-proof and Republican-proof. And the best way to do that is a New Deal for the 21st century. I believe in that too, so that everybody can have a chance at a decent job. And finally, I believe that we need to make sure and make a pathway for everybody to get an education. This is one of the modern necessities. Kids nowadays are going to have to go through a lot more jobs than we had to go through. They're going to have to change jobs a lot because the pace of change always goes faster. And so they need a path to education. My proposal is to reorient ourselves. We seem very ready to invade other countries and rebuild them. In fact, did you know that we have now spent more money rebuilding Afghanistan than we spent rebuilding Europe after World War II? And that's adjusting for inflation. We have $1 billion worth of what they call in Afghanistan ghost schools. Let me explain to you what a ghost school is. It is a school with a building and no teachers and no students. $1 billion of our budget went into the hands of local warlords and God knows where. And yet Flint still has water that burns when you stand in the shower. We have got to make patriotism a neighborhood affair. Patriotism is making sure that your neighbor has health care, daycare if they can't afford it, and someone to stay with the elderly while their children are off at work. And that's why I'm proposing a domestic service corps. I would love to revive the Civilian Conservation Corps back from Franklin Delano Roosevelt to give young people a chance to serve their country right here at home, because patriotism should not end at our borders. The elderly are much more likely to face loneliness and neglect here at home than they are to ever face an attack from a foreign terrorist. That's why patriotism means making sure young people have a chance to serve their country in their neighborhood, building libraries in poor areas, building 24-hour community recreation centers in poor areas, so that these young people in poor areas have something to do instead of getting arrested. After 2 years of service in this Civilian Conservation Corps, you could get a year-for-year scholarship to a tech school. For 4 years, you could get a year-for-year scholarship in a university that you get entry into. That is patriotism. That is true blue patriotism. And that's what I propose for the future. And Democrats, we must learn to speak, to invite other people into the conversation. If we harp on Trump constantly, and I oppose Trump. If you've ever read anything that I've written or listened to any speech that I've given, I am opposed, root and branch to Trump, diametrically opposed. But people need to hear about things that affect them in their everyday life. Because what makes us human makes us equal. And none of us in here wants to die any earlier than we have to. Everybody in here wants jobs for our family. And all of us know we all need education. Let's propose a bold platform that makes us real Democrats to bring help to every single American, regardless of their background. That is the way to win in the 9th District. Start at our human common ground. That's my strategy for the future. I'm here to take your questions. Ask me anything about any topic, and I would love to hear from you. And it's so great to see your faces up here in Sautee Nacoochee. Beautiful area, beautiful people. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.